There you go. That's quick. Welcome everyone. Welcome Maricopa residents, business owners to the City of Maricopa 2018 Economic Summit, where entrepreneurs meet opportunity. My name is Denise Earhart. I'm the Economic Development Director for the City of Maricopa. Today we have an impressive keynote speaker and incredible lineup for today's panel. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the dignitaries in the room. I have Mayor Christian Price, Vice Mayor Peg Chapados, Councilmember Marvin Brown, Auction Tribal Council former Chairman Luis Manuel, Blanca Varelo from Congressman Tom O'Halloran's office, CAC Board of Governors Dan Miller, Maricopa Flood Control District President and former council member Dan Frank. We also have several members of our Maricopa boards, commissions, or committees and commissions here tonight. If you're an appointed member to any of these advisory groups, please stand. So with that being said, I would like to welcome Mayor Christian Price. Mayor Christian Price to the podium to kick us off. While Mayor Price needs no introduction, it's important to highlight that he has been a resident of Maricopa since 2005. After moving from Chandler with his wife, they purchased their very first home and started a family. Mayor Price is an enormous advocate of networking, meeting new people, establishing relationships with citizens, stakeholders, regional partners, and members of neighboring communities, and other government officials. He strongly believes that good working relationships with these groups and individuals will help Maricopa establish a strong, well-rounded regional player and directly influence the ability of the quality of life of the citizens of Maricopa. For more than 13 years, Mayor Price, I think it's been a little bit longer actually, right? Mayor Price has been an entrepreneur and small business owner. He is a partner of the Sierra West Group, a financial advisory firm. So please help me welcome Mayor Price.
It's a good thing I gave her the short bio, right? Thanks, Denise. I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. You know, small business and entrepreneurship is something that I absolutely adore. I remember as a kid, my family, and just like probably all of you, your parents would say, well, what are you going to be when you grow up? Well, I never had an answer for that, and I'm still trying to figure that out. I'm still trying to figure out what I'm supposed to be when I grow up. But in the meantime, I remember thinking to myself the different jobs that were out there and that I didn't want to sit behind a desk all day and do nothing. I really wanted to get out there. I wanted to meet people. I wanted to talk with folks and wanted to be helpful and influential in moving things forward. And so it's interesting that over my lifetime, I found that entrepreneurship is for me. It's something that I thoroughly enjoy, and I think that most of you enjoy it, and thus by the interest that you have here today. But there's so many different angles that come from being an entrepreneur. There are those that have established companies, those that are just starting out one, those that just have a dream and believe that someday they can do something because nobody else is doing it, finding a niche. I was once told that a good friend of mine, I asked him how he started his business, and he said, I went through the phone book. This is a few years ago. But he goes, I went through the phone book, and I took two of them. And I took the first one, and that was several years ago, and I pulled it open, and I compared it to today's phone book, and I saw all the businesses that used to be there and were no longer there. And those are the ones that failed and went out of business. And then I saw the other ones that were still there, and then I kind of looked for the little intermediate niches in between them, and that's where I decided I needed to start one because nobody was in that space. And I found that to be interesting. The sky is the limit. There really isn't anything that we can't do if we put our heads to it, our minds to it, but it can be really hard, especially when you look at the challenges that are out there. I will talk to you just briefly about a few stats, and these are things that you guys already know, but I love to have them reiterated. And that is that, you may or may not know this, but that small and medium-sized businesses globally, on average, contribute 50% or more to the world's total GDP. 50%, small and medium-sized businesses. They help provide employment to an estimated 60% of the local workforce in any given nation. So 60% of all people in a given nation work for a small or medium-sized business. That's amazing. They can help create up to 70% of all new job opportunities, and they account for nearly 30% of all exports worldwide. In fact, it was this very time last year I was at a meeting called the Joint Advisory Planning Council, or JPAC. And in that, it's a transportation-based initiative that we understand that you have to be able to move your goods and services if you want to start a company, right? Because you're not going to try and build something and not be able to move that out to sell it to whatever you need to do. And we were honoring a bunch of small businesses from around the valley. And we had these videos, and we were talking about these different small businesses. And I'm not going to give you the name. I'll let you find it for yourself. But one of the small businesses that floored me was a gal who loved to sew. And she decided that she was going to sew head covers for golf clubs. Now, that doesn't sound like much, right? Well, this is the new world we live in. There's a little thing called Amazon. And whether you're on Amazon or not, or whether you've ever bought anything from Amazon or not, you got to remember it started in a little room all by itself, and now it's this behemoth. But it's also bringing a lot of people along with it. And this gal sews these head covers, and guess who has one of her head covers? A little person named Tiger Woods. And so because of these connections that she's making and putting herself out there, she now exports worldwide these head covers. And I found it fascinating. Someone who got into the business to make a little extra money on the side ended up finding herself in this business and then finding herself as an expert in exporting around the world, something she never dreamed a few years earlier that she would be doing. And that's the power of entrepreneurialism, is the ability to do things and carry things worldwide. But it all starts small. It is really hard for us sometimes to understand in a world where we want to feel and touch and see the product of the effort that we've put forth. But I always tell people, entrepreneurship is not like ordering a steak. You don't go in and sit down and say, I'd like this T-bone, I want it rare, and then in about 15 minutes it comes out and it's served to you and you eat the steak and you love it, and then you pay the bill and you walk out. That's not the way starting companies works. It's tough. It's hard. Sometimes you put a lot of sweat and blood equity into it. You put your life savings in there. And then at the very last minute, sometimes it comes down to a make or break decision. You've all heard the experience of, and forgive me if I get some of the stats wrong, but you've all heard the experience about the moment in which FedEx was born. And it had been struggling to compete against all the other type of companies out there, UPS and others, and it was on the verge, and the owner came down to his very last decision. He had just enough money to pay the bills and pay for everything he had, or to pay his employees. Now, I wouldn't recommend this, but he went to Vegas. And he basically bet all of that money, all of it, on the roulette table. And he won. And that is how FedEx was born, because he was able to go home and pay both his employees and his bills. Now, I don't recommend that, but the point of the story is sometimes it comes down to that one final decision after all of that hard work, after all those years of experience. And that can be downright heart-wrenching to have to make those decisions. Nobody that I know goes into business to A, work for free, and B, see nothing come out of it. But we do for a long time, because when you believe in the dream and you believe in something coming about, that's how you get to that point of something that you can feel and touch. It's not like ordering the steak. It takes investment, it takes hard work, but it ends up becoming a reality when you believe in it and you put enough sweat equity into making it happen. So I'm excited for today. I'm thankful for our Economic Development Department for putting this wonderful keynote speaker together, as well as the panel. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you learn a little bit more about entrepreneurialism, what it means to understand startups, existing businesses, from incubators to accelerators to everything in between. There are lots of different freeways on this, or lanes on this freeway, but they all have a role to play when it comes to building a successful business environment. And if we just have one of them or two of them, then we end up shooting ourselves in the foot. I believe in having multiple arrows in that quiver, because the more options you have to go to, the better off we are. So with that, and without further ado, thank you very much for being here, and we hope you enjoy this evening. Appreciate it.
Mayor Price, thank you so much. It's always such a pleasure and honor to listen to you speak, because you really know how to get us excited, and you intimately know entrepreneurs since you're one yourself. So I want to get everyone excited about today's topic. We have a brief video to show you. So sit back. You can't recline in these seats, but enjoy. Once again, welcome to the 2018 City of Maricopa Economic Summit, where entrepreneurs meet opportunity, where the purpose is to have a rich discussion around entrepreneurs and the ecosystems designed to encourage growth and local economic impact. The Economic Development Department is responsible for helping diversify the local economy, increasing tax base, creating an environment where wealth can be generated, and improve the quality of life of the residents. Maricopa's vision is to be a leading regional partner, providing growth opportunities for new companies, entrepreneurs, and expanding companies by delivering high-quality services, sites, and talent to businesses. Now more than ever, we have to rethink economic development's three-legged stool, which has traditionally focused on business attraction. Throughout the years, we've learned that nurturing existing businesses in the community also plays a vital role. But the reality is that local economic development needs to consist of business attraction, business retention, and what we are talking about here today, which is business growth. Every community in America has the opportunity to grow and build local entrepreneurial ecosystems. Those ecosystems are spreading across the U.S., working to remove barriers that obstruct a person from making an idea into an economic reality. Entrepreneurs are needed at the heart of both entrepreneurial ecosystems and economic development. In order for that to happen, entrepreneurs and ecosystem builders from all walks of life must be included at the table, and that means that we must rethink our perception of what it means to be an entrepreneur. Although I think the mayor gave us a really good idea. You need to be a gambler. We need to find ways to engage all members of the community, especially the makers, the doers, the dreamers, in developing a stronger, more inclusive future and investing in what is, in many ways, our scarcest resource. We must invest in people. This evening, we have put together a very special program with expertise from across the U.S. I'm pleased to introduce Mo Collins, a new economy specialist. I think she'll explain what her title means, right, Mo? She has more than 20 years of academic, nonprofit, and entrepreneurial experience. She has spoken throughout the US and Canada, and now she can add the city of Maricopa to her resume. Please help me welcome Mo Collins.
Hi. I am so glad to be here. My name is Mo Collins. I am a new economy specialist. I'm on, right? Can you hear me? Yes. Say yes. Okay, good. Yes. All right. So I am a new economy specialist. I have expertise in technology, innovation, entrepreneurship, economic development, and more specifically, women's entrepreneurship, for those of you that I spoke with out in the lobby. I am very glad to be here, and thank you so much, Denise, for those kind words. Thank you, Mayor, for your motivational comments, and that video was dynamite, wasn't it? That was really good. I'm really honored to be here, and I think that we live right now in very challenging and changing times. Would you agree? Yes. Okay. No one describes this better than a man by the name of Robert Atkinson. He is an economist. He writes for the Kauffman Foundation. Who knows what the Kauffman Foundation is? Okay. It's the largest foundation associated with entrepreneurship alone in the world. They have assets of over $2 billion. And so the very best researchers and writers and academics and thought leaders write and speak and talk on behalf of the Kauffman Foundation. And Atkinson is one of them. And he says that somewhere in the mid to late 1990s, we went from an economy driven by manufacturing and led by large corporations, would you agree? To one led or driven by technology innovation and led by entrepreneurs. But what does that mean, right? What does that really mean? Well, he says that what's happening right now all over the world is that we are creating these new innovations, and these innovations are being rolled out across industry, and it is transforming our economy, every aspect of our economy. He talks about how it began in the late 1990s, and it will probably start to calm down in the 2030, 2035 period. So we have this window, this kind of gray area that we are knee-deep in right now, would you agree? That is changing dramatically everything on the face of in our communities, in how we do business. All of those things are in a state of very profound flux. Our job is to navigate this. And no generation has navigated these kinds of changing economic waters in the past with this kind of change since the Industrial Revolution. So in a way, we're gifted. We are the ones that are driving these changes. We are setting the pace and the stage for everyone who follows us. And this is what I want to talk about tonight first. Atkinson says that the first part of this process of change, this transformation in our economy, the first 15 years, from 1990 to about 2015, was what he calls the creating stage, the rolling up stage. We are creating these new innovations, stronger, faster, cheaper, smaller. He says that the next half of this phase, now until 2030, 2035, is the roll out of this phase, meaning that we were creating all of these things, we were ramping them up, and now we're going to start rolling them out. Well, what does that mean? Well, I'd like to start by giving you an example of what rollout means and the kinds of massive and profound innovative changes that we will all be dealing with at one level or another in coming years. In the biomedical field, for instance, in 2017 alone, we had a number of rollouts. One was in April, when medical teams were able to use CRISPR, a DNA editing tool, to fix the DNA of an embryo in the womb. So they had an embryo that was in the womb, it had a problem, and they were able to fix it. How many of you know what CRISPR is? A few of you. So for a lack of anyone that's really good at medical technologies, just don't cover your ears for just a moment. Okay, it's a little tiny pair of scissors, right? It's a little tiny pair of scissors that can cut single strands of DNA and paste in new strands of DNA that are neutral or are healthy. Of course, that's not what it is, but that's how I visualize it, and I think it helps us all to visualize it that way. That was early in the year. In November, another team of medical scientists were able to treat a 44-year-old man with Hunter syndrome by altering his DNA using CRISPR. Now, we don't know if he's cured yet, but we know that chances are he is. And that was a huge breakthrough. In December, the American teams learned that in China, scientists who have CRISPR had already done CRISPR types of editing on 84 patients. They were way out in front of us, and we didn't even realize the magnitude of the work that they were doing. So I ask you, why should we care? What do you think about this CRISPR technology? Does it have applications that are larger than maybe that one particular application? Examples. Anybody have any ideas how we could use CRISPR? There's a whole slew of genetically created DNA problems. Alzheimer's. Was that what you were going to say? What a wonderful opportunity that we would have to be able to cure people of Alzheimer's in advance of them even having it, right? I'm looking forward to that.
Down syndrome.
Down syndrome, another very good example, a genetically inherited disease. But what really brought an outcry with this technology, with CRISPR, was the question of designer babies. Designer babies. If we can edit DNA, and we can take out single strands, does that mean that if I want a child with blue eyes instead of green, that I can actually order that up? Or if I want a child who's taller or smarter or more athletic? And the answer to that question theoretically is yes. And that opens up a whole world of question, does it not? And that's one technology innovation in one industry. Now let's move on. The egg industry. In February of last year, a scientist in Finland held a press conference, and in that press conference, he announced that he had 3D printed ground beef. Y'all know what 3D printers are, right? Yeah. Okay, all right. He had 3D printed ground beef. He said, I'm using beef stem cells, so I'm not using live cows, but I'm printing ground beef. It's a little dry, that's it. Looks like a hockey puck to me. I don't know about you guys, but it looks really dry. He said it's a little dry, and it was a tad expensive. It was $330,000. I don't know if that included the tomato in the bun. You'll have to ask him. But he had the breakthrough. He had the aha moment. He had the proof of concept that he was able to 3D print ground beef. 3 months later, another press conference, surrounded by venture capitalists, the same man, and his now large team, announced that by 2020, they would be in UK supermarkets with a specialty product, a specialty ground beef product. And by 2025, they would be in the US with a comparable product to regular ground beef, comparably priced. Now just think on that for a moment, please. If you walked into the grocery store tomorrow, be honest, and you saw 2 containers of ground beef, the same price, they looked the same, they were indiscernible from one another. One was made from beef stem cells using 3D printing, and one is made from the body parts of a live cow. Do you see where I fall? What would you buy the 3D printed beef? Raise your hand if you would. 10 of you. To the rest of you, do you remember when we wouldn't buy anything online because we were afraid that our credit card information would be stolen? It's coming. It's coming. And I say to you that if we can 3D print ground beef, that means that we can 3D print all kinds of things, right? Yeah. The cattle industry in Arizona is not huge. It's $1 million cattle are raised in the state of Arizona every year. But in aggregate, it contributes $800 million, all of the peripherals around cattle, contribute $800 million to the Arizona economy. I currently live in Iowa. Iowa trades places with North Carolina every year for hog production. It is a $1 billion market for us. What do you think the implications of this are?
Positive effect on the environment.
A positive, yes, the CO2, right? We could feed the world protein. We could, correct? What about farmers in Arizona? What about farmers in Kansas and Texas? Texas is the biggest cattle state. It's a problem, right? I would like to say it's a change. It's a change. One technology innovation, one industry. If we were to take a look at products that have been created that have application across multiple different industries, the list could be 5 times as long as the one I've put here. Denise only gave me 45 minutes, so I have to hurry. So my list is very short so far. My list is very short. But even the lowly drone, which, many of our kids have drones already, right? Well, drones have found a way into the transportation industry. Amazon last year delivered 20 billion packages to their Prime members. That's the only data we have is on their Prime members. So it's not even the total of the packages that they delivered. 20 billion packages, folks. And they have discovered that the last mile of delivery is the most expensive, where the guy gets out of the vehicle and he touts himself up to the door, and all those videos where he tosses it over the, you've seen those, right? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. So the last mile is the most expensive part of the delivery. Well, drones can go over 100 miles an hour, one. They can deliver a package of less than 5 pounds for about $1, that last mile. They're rolling it out this quarter. That's nothing on UPS. UPS is installing drone heliports on top of delivery vehicles. They believe that they can save $50 million a year in delivery costs by having drones do that last mile. It's really just the last, 50 feet? Yeah. First, that last 50 feet, then the drivers, autonomous vehicles. We are in the middle of this kind of transformational change. Every industry on the face of the planet is going to be or is knee-deep in these kinds of transformations, and the ripple effects are profound. There are no exceptions. From dentists to doctors, to retail stores, to manufacturers, to funeral homes, to daycares. Every industry is affected, and it's like waves on a beach. For every one industry or one innovation that I can cite for you today, there's 10, 100, or 1,000 more just under the surface, waiting the opportunity, the capital, the market position, the entrance opportunity to get into the marketplace. And most of those innovations are created and they are run by entrepreneurs. So what do we know about entrepreneurs? Well, they're not all millennials with beards, but I thought he was awful cute. You're supposed to laugh. There we go, that's better. So we know that entrepreneurs create nearly all of our net jobs right now in the United States. That does not mean they create all the jobs. In fact, large corporations create far more jobs than young, under 5-year-old companies. But I think it's like 80% of all the jobs that are created each year are created by very large companies. But the churn rate, because in part of this technology transformation that we're all going through, plus outsourcing, plus other kinds of efficiencies, is creating far more job loss than job net creation. And so the net impact is less than zero. And the remaining jobs, the remaining net jobs, are those that are created, those 20% that are created by entrepreneurs. This has been the case for over a decade, according to the Kauffman Foundation. We also know that there are more than 500,000 companies that start in the United States each and every month. 500,000 companies each and every month. Given 20 minutes, I could probably tell you how many are in your county each and every month, because we now are in an age of big data. And that empowers us to know what's happening in our communities, who's doing what in our communities, in a way that we've never before been able to tap into. The other thing that we know that is a problem for us is that startups are struggling. The rate of entrepreneurial startup activity has been in decline, particularly among those that start with employees. And this is a real problem. If I start a company with one employee or just myself, and then I go and I start to grow, it takes a while, correct? Just agree with me so I can go on. Okay, but if I start a company and the average spinoff that has employees starts with 7 employees. If I start a company on opening day with 7 employees, it doesn't take me as long to grow bigger. I can scale much more quickly. And so we want to support as many startups with employees as we can, but the opposite is happening right now. And part of the reason the opposite is happening is technology innovation. We are able to outsource to technology so many of those different tasks and services and things that we needed when we ran a company that previously were done by people that we had to hire. And now they're being done by technology. And so we're starting smaller, much more focused companies. And as we grow, we need fewer employees. And one of the outcomes of this, which is not on my slide, that I want to tell you about, is this long-term vision of wealth clustering. Have you heard this before? There's a man by the name of Derek Thompson. He wrote an article, if you're interested in this kind of thing. It's called, let me think. Where Did All the Jobs Go, I believe. It's July 2015, the Atlantic Monthly, Derek Thompson. And in this article, he talks through how technology is changing how we start companies and how we grow companies and where our jobs come and where they go. And in it, he noted that as we advance into this new economy, that the mass of wealth is accumulating among fewer and fewer people. For example, he talks about AT&T in 1964 as being our largest media company, which they were arguably at that time. And at that time, they were worth $270 billion, so their value was very high. And they employed 750,611 people. A lot of people, correct? Today, if we account for the year changes, Google, or Alphabet, is our largest media company. Would you agree? Google is worth over $370 billion. So they're worth $100 billion, hard to imagine, more than AT&T was in comparable dollars. Guess how many employees Google has? Just throw a number out. 5,000. Well, now you just screwed up my whole joke. So 55,000 compared to 750,611. And there's far more wealth. So where's the wealth? Where's the wealth? It's concentrated. It's no longer being shared down to all of us in the middle class, all of the workers, because we don't need as many workers. And that's the peril of the new economy that we have to guard against. And one way to guard against that is to promote entrepreneurship. Now, the Kauffman Foundation has found a new and a very nice array of ways to measure entrepreneurial activity. And they have 3 new measures that Denise mentioned in her video that she's going to talk about probably later on our panel. And they are growth entrepreneurship, those companies that are scaling, that are growing and getting really big. I want you to think of Uber. That's a really bad example, but it is a growth-oriented company. Startup activity, those companies that are in the early stages of starting a firm, we rank 8th. This is the region, the metropolitan statistical district. It's not just Maricopa, mind you. And then in Main Street entrepreneurship, though, we rank 38th. And I find that really hard because I spoke with so many of you before we started, and most of you are small companies. Raise your hand if you are a small business owner. Look at this group, Denise. Look at this group. So we have work to do for you, according to Kauffman. Do you think we have work to do for you? Yes. Okay, all right, here we go. So we know that ecosystems that support entrepreneurs, that it's happening in big ways in cities. Places like Tampa, Raleigh, North Carolina, Austin, Chattanooga. Have you ever been to Chattanooga? Great town, right? They're a gig city. And these are ecosystems that are strong and vibrant, and they're built upon a unique set of assets. Universities, federal labs, medical institutions, large corporate R&D divisions, all collectively creating a pool of talent and innovative ideas that get networked together in this little cluster geographically of an area or a city. And we all want to emulate that, right? But how big is Maricopa? 46,000. I will tell you, I looked it up. You're not 46,000, you're 45, you're 48, you're 51. You're growing so fast that even the most reputable sources have a hard time figuring out what your population is. And that creates some unique opportunities for you, as well as, of course, a few challenges. So all over the country, if you were to get a big map, we are seeing ecosystems, supportive, formal, supportive ecosystems to help entrepreneurs start and to grow and to exit. And we want a roadmap. Do you agree? Yes. We want to know how to do that. Okay. Well, for a long time, we all thought we needed to be Silicon Valley because that's where all the stuff was happening. So everyone was emulating that. When I was at the university, we were all studying the Silicon Valley. Well, what are they doing? Well, they have an ocean. Well, we got bike trails. Well, they have venture capitalists. Well, we got the bank down the street. We didn't have comparable assets. So we really couldn't be Silicon Valley. That didn't work for us. And then Brad Feld came out with a book called Startup Communities. And we all ascribed to the book, and it was really good. But he was talking about Boulder, Colorado, which is one of the powerhouse ecosystems in the country, the oldest and one of the most powerhouse ecosystems in the country. I'm going to talk about it in a minute. And that didn't work for most of us. And then you add into that we have communities like Maricopa that are growing. They're new cities. And because they're new cities, the characteristics and the demographics and the way we live and our downtown districts and the way we grow are all different. So how do we compare and contrast? It becomes really difficult. The Kauffman Foundation has done a lot of research around this topic. And they now say that we should win where we stand. Or to quote them directly, they say, you should win where you stand. Win where you stand. Meaning that we should measure our assets in all of their different forms, rally them together with champions, and take action, all collectively in support of entrepreneurs. What do you think of that? I think it sounds really good. So what does that mean? Well, this is my belief. If entrepreneurs could do this alone, if we could create our own ecosystem, if we could create the resources and services that we need, we would have done it by now, and you would have no need for forums like this. So somehow we have to have other resources, other organizations, other entities in place at the table assisting us in building this supportive community around entrepreneurs. And most of us believe that there are really 4 key players that need to be on the table, and that those players need to become champions in support of the areas that they can bring and contribute the best to. So we have nonprofits, we have the private sector, we have the public sector, and we have education. And I'd like to talk about each of them for just a moment, if you'll bear with me. First, let's talk a little bit about, isn't this a funny picture? It looks kind of familiar. I took it this morning. I did not. So first, let's talk about the public sector. So the public sector, unbeknownst to many of us, can have the most dire, disincentive, stifling effect on entrepreneurship, or it can have the most profound, accelerating support of entrepreneurship. And it happens mostly through planning, ordinances, and regulation. How many of you, Denise, you have to face front, you cannot look back. How many of you are registered, that are business owners, are registered business owners with the city of, and nobody's videotaping this, right? Do you have a business license? Raise your hand. How many of you, okay, this is where you have to be really brave. Yes, it is. How many of you are not registered but are doing business? It's okay, you can raise your hand. All right, a lot of you. This is the challenge we face across the country. None of us want more regulation, right? Nobody wants the government in our business, correct? Here's the problem that we face on this side of the fence, and I'm from the public sector. If I don't know you exist, how can I help you? If I don't know that you're doing business in your living room or in the extra bedroom or in the basement or in the garage, how How can I let you know I have a networking event for you? How can I let you know, or how can I even assess that if I opened a microloan fund with 0 interest rate, and I had mentors that wanted to help you start your business for free, or I had people that were doing similar kinds of business that we could network and get you some economy of scale in your purchasing. But how can I tell you? How can I share those things with you, those resources with you, if I don't know you exist? So everybody's got to come to the table. Everybody's got to come to the table, including us, the entrepreneurs, and the city. So we believe that it starts with the position of power, and who has the power in this equation? Is it the city or is it you as an entrepreneur? Say it, it's okay. It's the city. So the city, our public sector partners, need to come to the table, and we ask them, when they're doing ordinances and regulations, to do it with an approach of guiding and supporting versus regulating and barring. Guide and support versus regulate and bar. In 2012, the American Association of Planners did a survey of 100 cities in the United States and found that 75% of them, 2012, had either a negative or no ordinance in place to deal with Airbnb, Uber, or pop-ups. Now, y'all know Uber, right? Do you think it's going away? Do you know that last year Uber was valued at $62 billion? It is the highest valued startup in the history of mankind. It's not going away. So do we just ban it? I think not. Good public policy would suggest that this is a new business model for a new economy, and we need to find ways that it accurately and adequately is supported, but correctly, given the values of our community. And there are communities that have done so with Uber. And there are communities that have banned it. The same with Airbnb. I'm gonna get in trouble. There's a tree house in Schaumburg, Illinois. That's Airbnb. It was terrific. It had a koi pond. It had the coolest stuff. And it was blithely entirely illegal. And the city of Schaumburg, Illinois, hauled this person into a city council meeting to explain himself. And it ended up a shouting match. And the shouting match attracted ABC, NBC, Fox News. You know where I'm going with this? And at the end of the day, nobody wanted to be Schaumburg, Illinois, because they looked foolish. And there was a lawsuit promised. And there were rebuttals, and there were bad comments both ways. But we could have avoided the whole thing if we had done good public policy at the get-go and worked to figure out what we were going to do about Airbnb. I would encourage you to go through and review all of our regulations, all of our ordinances, not to make them easier, not to make them soft and fluffy, because we don't want to be that community, right? But to make them supportive and flexible and fair, and to guide our entrepreneurs in a way that allows them to succeed, while at the same time safeguarding the quality of life we have here in Maricopa and the way that we vision our community to look and feel down the road going forward. The private sector has a tremendous amount of influence over ecosystem building as well. In fact, I believe that private sector can accelerate the whole thing, can blow up an ecosystem, in part by good, defined investment into the kinds of projects that otherwise would not happen, that the public sector cannot do, and that the nonprofit sector is not able to do either for the same kinds of financial or political constraints, but the private sector can. Private sector, especially our larger companies, also provide us with a whole wealth of talent. People that have expertise in education and training. We have an IT guy in the back of the room that I had no idea had started how many businesses? 4? Lawrence, I'm talking to you. Was it 4 you worked on? 4 startups? 5 startups. Did y'all know that? No, he's a quiet, meek little guy back there. But that's talent. That's talent. Finding that talent oftentimes can come from our private sector where people work. So that's an area of private sector involvement that's really important also. We are seeing the most amazing things in some of our mature ecosystems where an entrepreneur does really well, and they make some money, they exit, and maybe they're acquired or they merge with someone and they make a few $1,000,000. And suddenly I see them in a coffee shop talking to a startup and investing in a small company here, a small company there, providing some mentorship. That kind of what we call fortuitous cycling can create and accelerate a whole vibe around startups that would otherwise never occur. And it's all because of private sector involvement. We know we have to have nonprofits. I've had so many great conversations tonight with many of you out in the lobby about your passion and why you're doing business and how important that business is for you. And one of the things that I found was that one of the things that we've learned is that without a culture that supports entrepreneurship, that celebrates innovation, that does not point the finger at failure, and support and guides us to the kinds of innovation and the kinds of risk-taking that's needed to grow in this economy, we need nonprofits to help us do that. Our nonprofits also often are those who safeguard the arts, theater, all of those kinds of cultural amenities that make our place, our homes, something special. They are the things that distinguish Maricopa from Chandler. The personality, the spark, the sense of place that is this town that we live in and love. Our nonprofits safeguard that. I think, it's not this picture, the train, right? Didn't you just get the train? Do you know what I'm talking about? The flyer? What's it called? The Zephyr. The Zephyr, I drove into town. I saw a picture of it online and I was all excited. I drove into town and there it was. That's a cool piece of history. It's something we should celebrate and protect, and you have a nonprofit that's doing it. It's those kinds of resources that attract entrepreneurs to communities and keep them here. So they're really important to us. And finally, we know that we need educational partners. We need champions in the educational system for a lot of reasons. One is we have students that have talent, right? But secondarily, we have faculty members and professors who also have an enormous amount of expertise, oftentimes in emerging areas of industry-specific innovation that otherwise we would not have access to. I worked in a university, so I'm a bit biased. I actually served as the Director of Technology Transfer and Commercialization. And what we saw were some amazing innovations that came from our faculty that our faculty had no interest in exploiting. They had no interest in commercializing. And so we oftentimes were charged with building a team from the community of entrepreneurs around us to be able to build out a startup. More often than not, guys, I couldn't find the team. More often than not, I couldn't find the team, and that innovation would be licensed to a very large corporation 7 states away. And that's not how it could or should be. Would you agree? So our educational institutions are really important. They have talent, they have innovations that can run down the pike, we have commercialization opportunities. And many times, because of what we call defunding of the university system, we have a lot of interest in outreach. So many universities are looking at economic development, they're looking at incubation, they're looking at accelerators, they're looking at other kinds of ways they can be involved in entrepreneurial activity, utilizing funds and talent and resources, space and the like, that they may be able to provide. These are all champions. So the goal with building an ecosystem is to find these champions from these different sectors and to bring them together and ask them to boldly commit to action in support of whatever part of the ecosystem building that we need them to uniquely perform support in. So the city, we want ordinances and regulations and licenses that are fair and flexible and that provoke guidance and support. From the private sector, we want them to invest in our innovation districts. We want them to invest in the kind of activities that are important to us, housing, sometimes a central innovative hub, other kinds of physical benefits that we hope we can generate. We want our educational partners to champion our access to talent and to build out those pipelines with us that allow us to commercialize the big innovations, not just the little innovations. So all of these people are important, and we need our nonprofits, of course, to protect and enhance the placemaking that we know will attract entrepreneurs. How many of you have heard of economic gardening? Raise your hand. Chris Gibbons founded economic gardening almost 30 years ago. Oh, goodness. Did I get turned off? Can you hear me now? Okay. So there's a program. It's called economic gardening. And it was launched by a man named Chris Gibbons. And it's an approach of taking existing businesses with 2 to 99 employees and surrounding them with an array of resources and services and networking that allow them to grow very rapidly into much larger companies. But part of it, Chris knew early on, was that companies that start in a particular region stay in a particular region. We call them sticky. So if you start a company, odds are you're going to stay where you started that company if you are surrounded by the assets and the resources that are important to you. People, culture, diversity, innovation, like-minded peers, all of those things contribute. And Gibbons said, I thought very profoundly one afternoon, that creating places that are attractive to entrepreneurs and the talent they hire is as critical as coal and rail were to the last century's entrepreneurs. Do you agree with that? I do. So I compiled this little list. Ecosystems are not being built. I think that's a bit loud. I feel like I'm echoing. No, it's not.
You sound great.
Okay, you win. All right. So ecosystems are being built not just in large cities, like Tampa and Chattanooga that I mentioned earlier. All over the country, we are beginning to see ecosystems become reality and grow and be very healthy in small cities. Cities as small as you are currently, you won't be for long, but cities as small as 45 or 50,000. So I want to talk just a little bit about some of them. You're in the first column, you can see that, right? And I put you down at what, 48,000? Yeah, and y'all know you're 50, at least, and growing very rapidly. The median age in Maricopa is 33. I know, right? Kind of surprising. The income, wow, you guys are rich. The median income in Maricopa is 67,000. Look at Boulder, it's only 58. Look at Charlottesville, Virginia, it's 47. And then the educational level. So we celebrate our high education levels, but in our ecosystems that are really strong, those educational levels are out the roof. Now, most of these communities, all of these communities that I have listed in this chart have universities in their town. So this is a little misleading, so don't feel like you somehow don't measure up, because you do. You're way above the national average in terms of numbers of people over 25 with a degree. But in ecosystems that are blowing the socks off of entrepreneurship support, it's higher. So we need to aspire to higher. So I'd like to talk about a couple of these. First of all, Boulder, Colorado. Now, Boulder, of course, is a foundational ecosystem that people talk about all across the country. Boulder talks about itself as the startup capital of the world. There are 6 times more technology startups in Boulder than there are per capita on average in the rest of the country. So Boulder has this thing. There are 3 federal labs in Boulder, 3. There's a university, so the assets that contribute to innovation, the pipeline is strong, and Boulder has a long, rich track record of entrepreneurial innovation. And their ecosystem is one that if you want to see something that is close comparatively speaking to the others that I gave you, this would be a great road trip. And all you need to do is ask someone where Pearl Street is. It's their old historic downtown that is now a hub. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I'll bet you, how many of you already knew about Boulder? Raise your hand. Okay, good. I'll bet you I know something about Boulder, though, that you don't. You know, I talked about those 4 different organizations that need to be at the table. 22 years ago, Boulder, Colorado city officials passed an ordinance that said, if you get too big, you have to either leave or sell. Who does that? If you have too many employees, you can't play here anymore. Why did Boulder do that?
I think they just value their intimate setting and they wanted to keep out large corporations.
It was definitely a strategy to keep out.
Repeat what you said.
Yes, she wanted to keep the vibe, placemaking, smaller communities, smaller startups, it's a better vibe, and they wanted to keep out large corporations, said Denise. Yes, sir?
I think they also didn't want to become dependent on any particular company or industry.
The anchor industry dilemma that we all face in our economies, right? Yes?
Can you repeat that question again?
I'm sorry, really loud.
I think the reason that they would want to consider getting rid of the larger companies, they don't want to become dependent on any particular industry or company.
You have the microphone.
Okay, so what he said was that the city did not want to become dependent upon any one anchor industry, that if it went under would cause terrible ripple effect of unemployment, right? That makes good sense. But de facto, one of the things that policy 22 years ago did is it created an incubator within a city. It created an incubation program citywide that fostered a lot of space, a lot of networks, a lot of peer like-mindedness among people that were starting up, and all of the joys and the challenges that they face were all happening together in one geographic location. And I believe that champion act, more than anything else they did, the federal labs are important, the university is important, but that one act accelerated their ecosystem to the status that they have today. Yes, sir?
What was that cap at?
Say again?
What was the cap?
500. I didn't say it because you get a lot more impact if you all think it's 100. So there's Boulder. Charlottesville, Virginia. Anybody been there? Okay, so what do you know about it? You know, hopefully, that it's an ecosystem. It's a powerhouse ecosystem, small city, less than 50,000. And it is largely due, or it's accredited to the university there, that there's an enormous amount of technology transfer, commercialization. And in fact, in 2014, Charlottesville, Virginia won an award. They were 4th in the country, I think, ranked by Inc. magazine for venture capital investments. This little bitty town of 48,000 people. That's pretty wonderful, right? Well, I went to Charlottesville, and I'll tell you, what really blew my mind was not the venture capitalists that I saw and that I met with. What really got me excited was going into Starbucks and seeing a 67-year-old retired engineer on the floor playing Legos with 12-year-olds. What really got me excited was seeing small companies, teeny tiny little companies, doing customer discovery and beta testing their innovations in parking spaces that they rented for an hour, or for a couple hours, or for a day, or a weekend. That got me excited. And then I learned that social entrepreneurship permeates everything in Charlottesville, Virginia. Small for-profit art galleries like this one bring in and recruit cohorts of new and emerging artists to be housed with them, to be mentored with them for a year. And at the end of that time period, there's a gallery of celebration of those artists and the work that they've done. This is Heather Owens is a 2018 cohort member in one of four social enterprise art galleries in Charlottesville. I did not have an opportunity to look at other industries, but I was told that there were incubation programs like this with similar cohorts in the crafts industry there, in the clothing industry there, and other traditionally retail sectors where you would not expect to see that kind of community sharing and support. That, to me, is the power of having champions in one of those 4 sectors that accelerate your ecosystem. So the goal for us is to figure out who are our champions. Who are the champions in the nonprofit world in our town? Who are the champions in the public sector, in the private sector? And how do we spur them to act in support of a common goal? And it starts with us doing these kinds of meetings. It starts with communication and visionary sharing of where we want Maricopa to go. And then we plot backwards with our champions and with the entrepreneurs in lead. How do we get there? Can I give you a really good example before we close? Say yes, I'm probably going to tell you anyway. All right. Cedar Falls, Iowa. It's the last on my little list of districts that I pointed out to you. It's a small town, 45,000 people. It's in the middle of the state of Iowa. The downtown district is nestled up against the Cedar River, as you can see from that picture. It has a university, only 12,000 students though. It's very small. It's a comprehensive university, so there's very little tech transfer, very little commercialization. And up until 2010, there was a brownfield site, which is a site that's contaminated, that dissected the downtown from the river that it was adjacent to. So on the other side of this photograph, the river curls around, and there's a whole huge brownfield site. 15 years ago, this is kind of what the downtown looked like. Now, this is an older picture, but when I came and first saw Cedar Falls, this is what it looked like. About a 30% vacancy rate, very little upper floor housing, a downtown that had a very long, narrow, windy downtown district. And there was a need to create change. And in this case, the first champion, were nonprofit volunteers who wanted to see the downtown changed. These volunteers got together, held community vision planning sessions, and they formed a 501c3. They applied to become what's called a Main Street community from the National Main Street Center, where they would get free technical assistance and support and some best practices. And they pulled together a $120,000 budget with help from the city and a whole bunch of contributions from community members. And they started working on rebuilding their downtown. This is downtown Cedar Falls today. It is a national award-winning entrepreneur and entertainment district. Blows my mind how beautiful this downtown district is today. It has, this nonprofit organization hosts more than 100 events a year in this district. This downtown has become the living room of Cedar Falls, Iowa. Now, one of the reasons that I picked Cedar Falls is that Cedar Falls broadcasts and boasts that they are so focused on the families in their community. And when I interviewed people in Maricopa in advance of this conversation today, I heard over and over and over the values, the high value placed upon families in this community. Is that correct? Okay. So in Cedar Falls, they said, we want two things. We want to be in charge of our own economic destiny. We want to support entrepreneurs, but we absolutely have to guide and support and celebrate families. And so all the holidays are these major spectacular events. And I will be honest, as I looked at Maricopa, you do some dynamite stuff. On Christmas, the salsa festival, the fishing day, you guys are rocking this. We just need to pull it together. We need some champions to pull all of it together. In Cedar Falls, for example, literally between 2,000 and 3,000 people converge every year at Christmas in the downtown district for the launch of what's called the Holiday Hoopla. Santa Claus shows up. Once he came by helicopter, once he rappelled down the side of a building, once he arrived in this huge magic book that kind of opened up, and of course he showed up once in a sleigh. We're trying to figure out if we can get some drones to maybe, I keep telling them, do that, and they don't pay any attention to me, it's so sad. In the other times of the year, there are a lot of daytime events. So daytime belongs to the entrepreneurs, nighttime belongs to entertainment. In the daytime, things like this massive farmers market, which you also have, am I right? Is a huge hit in Cedar Falls. And this is what's really important. That guy right there, he lives downtown. He owns a technology startup company along with 4 other founders that does over $2 million a year upstairs in this downtown district. The company's called Far Reach. Daytime for entrepreneurs, it's a hub for that kind of innovation. They work here, they live here. Nighttime is for families and lots of entertainment. Now, this would be a great story about a downtown revitalization, right? And we would leave it at that, except for the private sector. In 2010, the Brownfield site, in a partnership with the public and the private sector, the Brownfield site was sold to a serial entrepreneur who made good, a hometown boy who made good and came back to Cedar Falls. And he launched a $29 million housing and green space project on that brownfield site. He got the property for $1 in exchange. He had to do new massive parking lot repaving. He had to do a beautiful new green space. He had to do hiking trails. But let me tell you what the end result was. This downtown area opened up with 60 units, townhouses, apartments, studio apartments. And I just want to read you the list because it's so cool. They did focus groups with the university students and with boomers that were ready to retire. I was one of them. And this is the list of resources and assets that they came up with to add value to the housing. Where is it? Here it is. Airbnb reserves. So there were homes, there were apartments and condos in these 60-plus units that are set aside permanently for Airbnb guests. Now, when they first did this, guess what? Airbnb was not an ordinance. It was not guided by any ordinance. Now, that's been changed. But same problem, we're all behind the 8 ball. There's a personal concierge. There's a personal concierge. If you need somebody to make dinner reservations for you downtown, if you need someone to walk your dog, if you need someone to do the cleaning in your apartment or pick up your dry cleaning or pick up your kids, if you are in one of these units, you can call on the concierge to do that for you. The developer put in a trailhead right outside of these units that runs into 100 miles of bike trails that meander through the green space back and behind into a federal park area. There's an outdoor plaza that has a theater, a raised stage, a stone raised stage. There's a dock, because you saw the river. Did I show it to you? Do you see the river back there? Way in the corner? So there's a dock now back there. There's fishing, there's kayaking. They recruited a sports rental company called Crawdaddies to come down and rent roller skates and kayaks and canoes and all of that kind of thing. Is this cool or what? And then in the wintertime, that outdoor theater is flooded, and we have an ice skating rink. On the business side, on the entrepreneur side, the developer was asked to find a way to put in a co-work. How many of you know what a co-work is? A lot of you didn't when I asked out in the lobby. Co-working is an approach where entrepreneurs that are very small, like many of you, one-man, two-man operations, can come to an open gathering place where there's always free coffee, high-speed internet, lots of sofas and chairs and places that you can study and work and share and innovate, mostly quiet spaces, but a beautiful area that allows like-minded entrepreneurs to have a quiet place to work, make copies, do some good things, have access to a projector and so on. Co-working started on the West Coast in 2006. There are now more than 7,000 co-works around the world. It is, if you don't have a downtown, hint, hint, it is an opportunity to site and build hubs of innovation for entrepreneurs for a very low or moderate cost. And I tell communities where I work all the time, if you don't have a co-work, incent an entrepreneur to open one. If you're a city official, give them 10 grand a year and incent them to open a co-work, and you will be amazed at how many people come out. In this case, part of the development agreement was that the developer had to put in a co-work. So on the second floor of the building I showed you a moment ago, second floor of this building with the deck, they put in 5,000 square feet of co-working space. 5,000 square feet. But here's the beauty of it. The city provided $10,000 a year to operate the co-work. The developer turned the co-work over to the entrepreneurs. The entrepreneurs created a 501c3, a foundation, to be able to manage the money, and this thing is rocking in downtown Cedar Falls in 2 years. 80 members. They have dozens of events a month, educational events, social events. They have cocktail parties. They have breakfasts. They have startup weekends. They have hackathons. All the time, there are things happening that welcome all kinds of entrepreneurs, not just techies. You can see the way they advertise it. If you think you're looking for a place and you wonder if you'll fit, you probably will. Come on down and try us out. Membership in the co-work can be as little as $30 a month. If you want to get extravagant, you can rent a locker and have a shower, and maybe you can have daycare services thrown in there. Do you see the value? Adjacent to the co-work, the developer, in conjunction with some angel investors, put in a whole slew of office suites for scale-up companies that were growing very rapidly, that had the potential to exit with a pretty fairly substantial financial event. And so those startup companies, the scale-up companies, are interacting with the startups by just walking down the hall. And angel investors and other types of investors, we don't have any VCs in my region or in that region, but all of these people are interacting with one another, and the kind of vibe and the kind of healthy innovation that's occurring and the number of business starts have more than tripled. So we have a chance, we have a choice. As we look into the future to see where our economy is going, the changes are profound. We will have fewer jobs. We will have new business models that stretch our imaginations and our limits of believability. We will have lots of opportunity to start new businesses, but we have to be brave enough to grab on and try it. We also have to build out the infrastructure to support those that are brave enough. All of you that are already doing business, we have an obligation to support you in every way that we can. And the people that organize this, Denise and the mayor and the other folks here that are public servants on your behalf, they have told me they are so committed to having you be successful, and that this community is a reflection of the goals and the values that you value, that they value. And an ecosystem and building an ecosystem like this will allow us to achieve some of those goals with you. But it can't be done just by the city. We have to have at least 4 partners. And we need input, we need guidance, we need your ideas and your support associated with what do you need, what do you want from your ecosystem. And that includes you're going to have to go get a business license, I'm just saying. So I would spend probably another 4 hours talking with you about co-working and bar camps and jellies and startup weekends and hackathons, but Denise will take a cane and pull me off the stage. Plus, we have this terrific panel of people that are actually doing and running programs that I'm just talking about. And so I'm going to close. I want to thank you for having me be with you, and I'm looking forward to hearing what our other experts have to say.
So at this time, I would like to invite Mo and the fellow panelists to take a seat on stage. Let's welcome Courtney Klein, co-founder and CEO for SeedSpot, Tom Schuman, executive director for the Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation, Kevin Fort, center director with Central Arizona College, SBDC. So this is the good stuff. I know we're running a few minutes behind. I think you just have to mute. Yeah. It's Mo's fault. This is the good stuff. We're going to do some Q&A. I know that we'll be passing out some comment cards as well, so we'll be able to take a few questions towards the end. So I don't want to rush anyone up there because you guys, like Mo said, you're doing this right now. So we certainly want to hear all your thoughts, your input. And for those in the audience, please bear with us, an extra 15 minutes. So for the past 30 years, entrepreneurship has been the focus of significant research in the US, increasingly at the global level. An enormous body of work and knowledge has been amassed in a quest to not only understand entrepreneurship, but also foster this fundamental underpinning of economic success. Communities throughout the US and the nations across the world have focused intently on creating the environment, the ecosystem, to nurture a startup culture, facilitate business growth, spur innovation, and cultivate the economic dynamism that only a strong entrepreneurship sector can bring. So the first question is, can you each say entrepreneurism like 100 times? I'm kidding. Okay. You can't hear me or? Okay. We do have audio issues in here, so we'll try to turn it up if we need to. Can each panel member please take 1 to 2 minutes to tell us about yourself and the organization that you represent? And we'll start with Kevin at the end.
Good evening. So my name is Kevin Fort. I represent Central Arizona College and America's Small Business Development Center Network. The network was started out of the Carter administration in 1976 as an initiative to mirror what was the success we were finding in the land-grant university concept. And that mandate from President Carter was go and make college and university resources available to the small business communities. The network has grown to over 1,000 service centers across the nation. We now are also international, which complements our initiatives from the global import and export trade. And we also house or co-sponsor the PTAC initiative, which is the Procurement Training Assistance Center for those businesses that are ready to move into government procurement programs.
Courtney Klein, honored to be here tonight, co-founder and CEO of SeedSpot, Arizona native, and two-time graduate of Arizona State University. Have spent my entire career as an entrepreneur. This is my second venture in SeedSpot, and the work that we do has become globally ranked. We're one of the top 3 incubators in the world and one of the top 20 in the United States, supporting early-stage entrepreneurs with mentorship, curriculum, and access to capital. We're headquartered in Phoenix. We provide a real holistic approach to the ecosystems that we work with in bringing in local mentors, local content experts, connecting local entrepreneurs to local capital, and ensuring that those entrepreneurs stay in the communities where they start. And I think I'll have more opportunity to share specifically the programs that we run, but thank you for having me tonight.
Good evening, glad to be here. I'm Tom Schuman. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Entrepreneurial Innovation in Phoenix, and we are a high-tech incubator. We work primarily with bioscience and medical device companies, the type of companies that you started your presentation on about CRISPR and such. We have an amazing group of companies. The science that is coming down the line into new products is truly amazing, and we get to work with those folks. So it's a pleasure to be there.
Cool. Well, you took up so much time earlier, Mo. Yeah. So we'll just dive right in. Tom, I've been to CEI. I've seen the center. It's absolutely impressive. Can you walk us through it and tell us a little bit about it? Would you consider yourself a co-working place or an accelerator?
Or none of the above. We are a traditional business incubator. Okay. And so when I say traditional, I mean individuals come to us when they have a proven business concept. So they're beyond the tablecloth kind of sketching.
Would you get a little bit closer to the mic? Thank you.
Okay. Most of them will have a prototype. Many will have patents. So that they're already moving down the development path. And we take them from that point until they launch into sales. And then just like the city of Boulder, Colorado, we kick them out so we can repeat and do it again. So incubators thrive on churn. We want new companies coming in, old ones moving on. What we do in the meantime is most of our tenants that are coming in are typically affiliated with a university, either ASU, U of A, and they're coming out as researchers and academics and scientists who want to commercialize the technologies that they've created in their lab, or they're serial entrepreneurs who've gone to the technology transfer offices at the universities and are licensing those technologies and coming over to CEI to incubate their businesses. They come and stay with us because we have wet labs, and wet labs are very difficult to find and lease, and this allows them to have the kind of controlled lab environment that they need to develop their products and run their tests. Some of our labs are FDA approved for that purpose, so there's high value in that. But the largest value that they get in being an incubator is the business development counseling and the mentorship, and it's the people that they're around. A large part of what we're trying to do is create a culture of sharing and innovation and collaboration. We'll have 40 PhD scientists working in 20 different companies in there on any given day, and the amount of interaction that goes on between them is truly amazing. It's almost selflessness almost sometimes in some situations. But it's that creative sharing and juice that really creates the culture that makes an incubator successful. Eventually they graduate and they move on. We have some fabulous companies that will soon be going into sales. One of them can actually detect cancer before you have cancer. So imagine that, before you have any symptoms, before actually cancer has started to form, they can detect it. So it's an amazing technology. Others are working on colon rectal cancer identification with just a real quick blood drop, and a test at your physician's office to help in the screenings for colon cancer and such. So what's fun about working at CEI is all the companies are, one way or the other, are involved in some kind of a life-saving technology. So you get a double benefit of one, you're growing the economy. We've created 519 jobs in the last 4 years, but you're also bringing out products that are, improve the quality of people's lives.
Incredible, incredible. Courtney and Kevin, can you tell us a little bit about your programming? You mentioned taking a holistic approach to an entrepreneur. Can you tell us more about that?
Absolutely. So we run 2 programs in the communities that we partner with for adults, and actually 1 program for youth, to Mo's point about a holistic model. So the youth program we deploy into high schools, teaching entrepreneurship on high school campuses, either as a core curriculum where students can actually earn credit for a course aligned to Common Core and CTE, the Career and Technical Education Standards, and we run an after-school program. On the adult side, we start with an early stage notion that entrepreneurs need support at the basic foundation of their business. So we start with a 2-day launch camp. It's intentionally designed to be run on nights and weekends because we understand many early stage entrepreneurs are either running their business 9 to 5 or have a 9 to 5 job that they're trying to launch a side business on top of. And the 2-day launch camp is designed to take entrepreneurs through the building blocks of a business. Have you identified a problem? Do you know who your customer is? Are you sure they're willing to pay for a solution? Is your solution really effective? And then what are the mechanics of actually launching that business? What are the capital requirements? What partnerships do you need? And how do you actually launch? The 2-day launch camp culminates with a pitch night that is open to the public. And we work in those 2 days to surround those local entrepreneurs with local mentors, local experts that come in from everything from forming the company to branding the company to scaling and raising capital. And our second program is an 8-week-long impact accelerator. And that's designed for companies that are either in business already or entering the market and need additional support and resources. That's run over 8 weeks, 1 night a week, and supported the other nights of the week through mentorship and access to partners that we provide. And that culminates in a very public demo day. Our demo days that we run in Phoenix have become the largest entrepreneurial event in the state. And out of that comes a number of connections that entrepreneurs can leverage to grow their business. So we've worked with 421 entrepreneurs to date. We've been in business for 6 years. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, and we've helped those companies raise $10.2 million in capital, keeping in mind that these are early stage ideas that we see at SeedSpot. And we've helped those entrepreneurs generate over 1,000 net new jobs and impact the lives of 2.2 million people with the product, service, or technology that they've created. I will say on top of that, Mo, thank you. On top of that, 49% of our founders are female and 45% are minority. And when we talk about inclusive communities, we mean that at SeedSpot, and we've secured funding from the Kauffman Foundation that Mo referenced very graciously for the past 3 years to ensure that all of the communities we work in replicate the same model of being truly inclusive, not just women and minority founders, but others. We've worked with entrepreneurs from the age of 18 to the age of 82. So by inclusive, we mean inclusive.
Thank you, Courtney. Kevin, take it away.
That's incredibly impressive. So with the SBDC, what you're getting is an accredited network of advisors across the country who bring different backgrounds to the table. From the get-go, one of the initial steps that we take our business advisors through is a certification process. So as a network, we've identified 7 core competencies that we expect our business analysts to have. It definitely addresses the concepts or the approach from minimally viable product to addressing the value proposition and the ability to take the product or service to market and find a viable customer. So we start there with the business model planning or the business model concept, determining value from the value proposition standpoint and identifying the market and the market share that's available for that particular business. And then launching. Behind that, the idea is that the SBDC is a no-cost, confidential counseling and education and coaching service that we deliver to those businesses that have that particular need. As a center director, my goal is always to graduate those businesses to a point where they can start participating in the private sector. So we like to be that no-cost or tax dollar at use service for entrepreneurs who need that particular service at that time. We counsel them, we grow them, we educate them, and we hand them over to our private sector partners to help really scale them up to that next level. It's definitely a holistic approach from our perspective as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kevin. You mentioned partnerships. As Mo mentioned, building an ecosystem for entrepreneurs is not done in a vacuum and often includes partners like educational institutions, government entities, corporate partners, financial capital partners. Can each of you share a little bit about your experience in identifying and creating some types of partnerships? And Mo, you can feel free to chime in.
So I think one of the most useful means of identifying them was the concept of a roundtable. In many, many states, these partners are invited to gather on a quarterly basis, a monthly basis, whatever makes sense for the region, to share their ideas, to share what they're doing, their programming, and through this create a spirit of collaboration and sometimes resulting in shared vision planning. So in Ohio, for example, there's the Entrepreneur Roundtable that was started by, believe it or not, Farm Bureau. And there are 45 to 60 different resources that gather on a quarterly basis to do exactly that kind of peer sharing from the support side of ecosystem for entrepreneurs. And I think that's a great example of how we identify and then teach these service provider partners to collaborate.
Awesome.
And we were started as a collaboration of a number of economic development, government agencies, and education in the city of Phoenix. The host for our center is Maricopa Community Colleges, and they were a large part of our founding, the MCOR, the corporate college there at the time. Discovery Triangle is an economic development agency in the area. Played a large role in identifying that the need in the community was for labs that could serve bioscience startup companies. The Flynn Foundation is a foundation in town that supports the biosciences industry, and they're a key partner in our startup. And then, of course, the key funding that paid for the brick and mortar to help us get going came from the Economic Development Administration in Washington, D.C. So it took a whole host of partners to be able to pull this program together. And we still rely heavily on that same group of people. And I think the other thing that's unique about Phoenix, coming from Detroit and listening to people who we've hosted here in town, is we have a very collaborative startup ecosystem. There's not a sense of competition amongst the others that are serving, whether they're the co-working spaces or other incubators. There's just a good ecosystem that we all have that really is starting to bear fruit now because of that. So I think we all rely on each other as partners as well.
And I would couch our partnerships at SeedSpot primarily into three buckets. One is the recruitment partners. So as we enter a community, we look to community colleges, we look to other economic development groups, we look to any investors or anyone in the ecosystem that may be interfacing, including city government, with early stage entrepreneurs to be a referral source to those that fit our model and we can actually support. The second layer of partnerships for us is around the actual content, the curriculum that we provide. So we lean on, in any given community, local attorneys, local banks, local mentors, people that have been there, done that, to define what a community can be when it supports itself. So that's on the content side. And then the third, I would say, to Tom's point, is kind of the next step, what happens after they are ready to launch. And for us, that really defines in two ways. One is the capital partners that we leverage. So because we are a national organization, we do run programs in communities across the country. We have a national network of angel investors. Kiva is a large partner of ours that provides 0% interest loans at $10,000 to early stage entrepreneurs. So we're able to leverage those capital partners nationally to bring them into ecosystems. And the second is to hand off entrepreneurs that are ready for the next stage of support to another incubator, another accelerator. SeedSpot certainly had alumni that have gone on to CEI and gained additional services.
We have three right now.
Yeah. You have 3 alum of SeedSpot right now. So that holistic approach, again, to communities is anchoring them into additional resources so they don't have to go to a Silicon Valley, a Boston, a New York to find the access to those resources.
I think the recurring theme with capital or access to capital is going to be accountability. From the SBDC standpoint, that's from day one is where we start with the accountability aspect for our clients. Understanding and demystifying the lending process. So we work great with our community lenders to put together programming that helps our clients understand what's currently happening in the financial industries, regulatory and otherwise. And then we want them to understand what is the appropriate capital or debt structure for a business, what's the appropriate way to leverage those particular resources in order to grow the business in a healthy and productive way. We also work very hard. Actually, we've launched this new initiative this coming year or this year, in working with the professional services industry to help them understand what specifically the financial sectors are looking for. So whether we're talking to accountants or attorneys, having that educational component to help them understand that tax strategy is definitely an important part of business development, but there's other components that need to be a part of that financial planning and wealth building component of businesses. And that's something that we're proud from a holistic approach from the SBDC standpoint, to bring that focus and that educational component to other professional services firms that are also in the business development.
Fantastic. So we talked about partnerships, and I think that was a theme in Mo's speech earlier today. And I guess, I hope everyone feels comfortable, but can you tell us how it all happens? Where do you get your funding from? Where has it come from historically? Where do you get it from today? Because I think that's what everyone wants to know, right? Like, how does this all go round and round for you?
So as I mentioned earlier, our startup capital came primarily from the Economic Development Administration and the City of Phoenix, and that's helped to get the building built, the equipment that we have in place and such, and we have the 3D printers and the labs and all those kinds of things that entrepreneurs like to play with. But our operating model, the way we work right now, is about 40% of my costs are covered by the fees that I charge the tenants. So they are tenants, I am the landlord, so there's a monthly bill that we charge them, but we're kind of do it on the Club Med kind of approach that, once they pay the rent fee, everything else is provided at no charge to them whatsoever. And the other 60% of the budget is currently covered by Maricopa Community Colleges. So we are subsidized by the school system there. And then we are, as a small business ourselves to some extent, we're also creating our sustainability model. So as companies graduate out of our incubator, we execute a royalty sales agreement with them, where they pledge a % of their sales back to the incubator to support it, and so that's there for the next group of entrepreneurs coming through. So that's the business model that we have.
That's incredible. Awesome, Tom.
We're structured, as I said, as a 501c3 nonprofit, so about 70% of our revenue is philanthropically funded. The other 30% is earned income. So on the school side, we do charge schools for the curriculum, the professional development, and the support that we provide to the educators that we work with. That ranges between $5,000 and $10,000 per year based on the program that they choose for the first year, and then drops incrementally every year that school stays with us in order to incentivize further impact for students. On the adult side, it's a blended model again. So whenever we enter a community, we leverage our national donors, the Kauffman Foundation, JP Morgan Chase, American Express, GoDaddy, that funds a lot of our operational costs. So the true cost to a community, usually it's led by an anchor donor, sometimes a corporation, sometimes a city government, that brings us in, and within that model, we surround that ecosystem with additional support, $1,000, $5,000 donations that support the local entrepreneurs in that community. The only fee that we charge to entrepreneurs is the program fee. In the 2-day launch camp, based on the community, it tends to average around $100, which is nominal for most entrepreneurs at an early stage. And our 8-week Impact Accelerator, typically in a community, is $1,000. And I say that in the context of understanding the local economy. Every community is different. Every cost that we absorb is different in every community, and every fee that we pass through to either donors or to the entrepreneurs themselves varies based on the economic model of the community itself and what's feasible.
The CAC SBDC program is funded 2 parts, primarily out of federal SBA dollars. So that's an appropriation that comes down every year annually. The host match comes from Central Arizona College. They also have additional indirect matching. So for example, we currently staff a dedicated position here in the city of Maricopa 3 days a week, and the college donates the space for us to staff that position and be able to work out of the office. And Mo indicated to me tonight that she has some opportunities for additional funding for our program, so.
Mo, can you stay, please? So as we learned this evening, entrepreneurship is the lifeblood of the U.S. economy. Venture capital can be considered the lifeblood of entrepreneurship. Can you tell us how venture capitalists differ from traditional lending institutions and how you best prepare your clients for venture funding?
The access to capital is certainly the lifeblood of the small business economy. I wouldn't say it's venture capital is the lifeblood. Statistics show that between 4 and 3% of people who apply for venture capital ever receive it. So it's a rare beast out there. A venture capital firm is typically looking to earn 30 times their investment within a 10-year time frame from a startup entrepreneur. So if they're investing $5 million, 5 years from now, they want $150 million back. And so it takes a very rare business that can turn that kind of performance in. Most of our funding is not coming from traditional lending either. We are dealing with scientific discovery and R&D, and there's really no hard assets to borrow against, and many of our clients are 2 to 3 years away from sales because our products need to go through the FDA approval process, which is very time consuming. So without a revenue stream and without an asset base, traditional lending is out of the question for them as well. So how do they do it? Two sources. There's a large amount of grant money that's available for scientific research. So the federal government runs the SBIR and STTI programs that set aside large amounts of money for small business startups in these technology fields. Within the state of Arizona, the Arizona Commerce Authority has their Innovation Challenge grants where they make $250,000 investments into technology companies here as well. So they're living on grant funds, both state and federal, and then family, friends, and angel investors. Many of our clients are able to get a first round of angel investment funds. That's typically $1 to $3 million in funding that they're going after. And we host 2 angel investing groups at CEI. So they hold their monthly meetings there. That's where they do their pitches and their screening and such. So we get our people plugged into that network as soon as we can.
Yeah, our goal at SeedSpot is that entrepreneurs never have to raise venture capital, in so much as they have profitable businesses that they're not seeking outside capital. We do encourage entrepreneurs at a certain stage of growth to either raise a friends and family round, a seed round, a Series A, et cetera. I would say in the world of venture capital, statistically, the norm that we are aggressively trying to buck is that those companies that truly are ready and truly need venture capital have access to it. And if you look statistically at the venture capital community, less than 7% of venture capital goes to female founders, and less than 2% goes to African American founders. That's not acceptable. And as we at SeedSpot try to ramp up these entrepreneurs at the earliest stage to prepare them for later stage resources so that if they were to go raise a round of capital, they have the traction and they have the knowledge to negotiate for themselves and to raise the appropriate amount of capital from the right partner without being taken advantage of.
So I think to address the question as far as what was the difference between conventional and VC or venture capital or angel, it's really going to come down to ownership and who's taking ownership or an equity stake in the company, right? So with conventional lending, they're taking on a risk for usually a claim on appreciable assets or depreciable assets that they can take a stake against, where a VC or an angel investor is going to be taking an equity stake in the company itself. We do work in the SBDC network with VC and angel investors when appropriate. We also obviously have great relationships with community and lending institutions. Really, it just comes down to what's the appropriate capital structure, what are the business, and I think it's been mentioned a couple of times tonight, the exit strategy is a very important conversation to have with the business owners, very early stage company, so that we know what is the appropriate types of structures and strategies we're putting in place from a capitalization standpoint. So.
Thank you. And Mo, do you have any thoughts on VC funding? So, as we've learned this evening, this is really not a one-size-fits-all. Mo and Kevin, perhaps, can you describe successful programming that you have seen across the U.S. and how communities create stickiness to encourage entrepreneurs to remain in the community? Now that I think about my question, this is really applicable to the entire panel, because that is the goal, right? That all of these firms that are growing are staying within their communities.
I love the word sticky, don't you guys? So the National Business Incubation Association, now it's called the INBIA, does a survey every year of incubation programs across the country. And in a survey they did almost 10 years ago now, they determined that 85% of graduates from comprehensive programs like incubators and accelerators stayed within 10 miles of where they received services upon graduation. That is some stickiness. And we believe that the kinds of services that are provided through incubation programs can be emulated by ecosystems. So if we build a network, we build technical assistance, if we provide the access to the right kind of capital at the right time, that we are creating an environment that is sticky. And so I am of the opinion that stickiness is inherent when you create a healthy ecosystem. And so our work, this is one of the good outcomes that comes from the good work we do when we build ecosystems.
Yeah, I would just state simply, when your banker, your attorney, your designer, your team, your investor is local, you have no reason to go anywhere else. At SeedSpot, 78% of our graduates are still in business today, and 82% of them are still in the geographic zone where they started.
The term's been stated a couple times tonight. I really think it just comes back to culture. When the culture understands the importance of local supporting local businesses, keeping investment and spending dollars local in the community, that culture cultivates additional entrepreneurial opportunities. So,
Thank you. Thank you. So at this time, I'd like for each of you to tell perhaps your favorite success story, clients that you've worked with in the past or clients that you're working with today. And we'll throw this one to Courtney.
This is so hard. Two that you may have seen, and then I'll tell a brief story. If any of you watch Shark Tank, you may have seen the dessert hummus. Anyone? That was an alumni of ours, raised $600,000 from Mark Cuban on Shark Tank. Another glove treat, treating arthritis with paraffin wax gloves, ranked by Oprah's top 20 list as one of the top products for health. My favorite personal, and when I talk about inclusion in a community, is Matt Cottle. 27 years old, adult with autism, who came to SeedSpot with an aspiration and a dream of building a bakery that would employ other adults with autism. And there's no incubator and very few organizations that would take that in. And we did, 6 years ago, work with Matt Cottle and his family. And I actually saw him today at the Southwest Autism Research and Resource Breakfast, 6 years in business, serving the best scones and muffins you could possibly fathom. We called it the SeedSpot 15 when he was in the cohort. Much like the freshman 15, we all gained a lot of weight when he was in the program. And that, to me, is a success story in that Matt is living out his business. He is catering to private events and corporations across Arizona, and he has a meaningful means of employment and saw that venture to fruition. And 6 years later is still in business.
Fantastic. Anyone else have a story they would love to share?
It's hard to pick out one. It truly is, because there's a story behind every company of what their motivation behind it is doing. So many of our companies have family members who've suffered from a condition or something, and they've kind of devoted their lives and their research to trying to find solutions to it. And those are just always touching stories. And they mean so much to us. The Beacon Biomedical is one of those. I mentioned them earlier that they have a cancer diagnostic coming out for colon rectal cancer because it affected a family member. It's a technology they licensed from the National Institute of Health. And they made their first dollar back in December of this year. But it was a 5-year path of getting that test proven, tested, and approved by the FDA. So it's a long path. The reason they stand out is they've been in the incubator for a long time now, and they're kind of the heart and soul of it. They embody the giving and sharing that we want to see from our folks. They go out of the way to be cheerful, supportive, and so they're absolutely a joy to have around, and they're getting close to graduation, and it's like, well, maybe we can make an assumption here. Maybe we'll keep these folks around, but so it's Beacon and many others like Beacon.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Mo or Kevin?
So early in my tenure with the SBDC, I had contacted a longtime client of the SBDC, and he was actually one of our state award winners. And I contacted him just to let him know, hey, I'm a new center director with the SBDC, wanted to make the introduction. And he's like, well, things are going great. I don't really need to spend time with you right now, so it's okay. I'm not going to force you. And it was about a year later that my phone rang, and it was this particular client on the other end of the line. And the conversation took shape something similar to, I went from around 800,000 in annual revenues to over 2 million in the last 12 months. And next Friday, I don't have enough money to pay my payroll. And it was about this time that I went into full-on panic mode, because what am I supposed to do? This is completely out of my wheelhouse right now. He had over 15 staff on his personal payroll, and he had 6 subcontractors totaling around 45 jobs that were depending on him at this particular time. At this time, I learned that there was no magic dust to economic or business development, that it's just hard, gutted out, dedicated work to making it happen. We worked really hard to dive into the financials to really understand how did this exponential growth on the revenue line translate into no cash in the account. Fortunately, I had the accounting and the finance background to at least sit down and have an intelligent conversation with them about cost control and some of the pricing structures that were causing challenges with the business. But the success story at the end of it was we did not have to take out additional debt. We were able to get payroll paid for that next Friday once we helped him realize he had a substantial amount sitting in receivables. So let's make those phone calls, and then let's start figuring out how to better manage the program and the operations. So I think from a success story on my part, it was really just the power of these businesses. I do remember driving away from this client's business that one afternoon after a very intensive session. And I'm not really all that ashamed to admit there was some tears in my eyes, because I know that had this client not had access to a service that was no cost to him, he likely would not have reached out, because he was not in a financial position to do so. So for me, it was really powerful, and I was really grateful that that people much wiser than me had the oversight and the foresight to see that taxpayer dollars could be really leveraged for good use in our communities, and that our business owners have programs like this to take advantage of.
That's incredible. Thank you for sharing your stories. So now the curveballs from the audience. Other than getting a business license, how can entrepreneurs become champions in Maricopa? And this is really open to anyone.
I'll take a stab at it. It's reaching out and helping another small business owner. It's the mentorship means so much. So if you're an experienced business owner or a retired business owner, and you can help another young person get started, it's amazing how the value of that, both from the experience and knowledge that you'll get, but just from the understanding and compassion from someone who's been there and has had those late night challenges and sleepless nights because of things like payroll, which everyone struggles with at some point. So I would say be a mentor to some other business would be the best thing you could do.
Absolutely. I feel like that's been another recurring theme, is the sharing, transferring of information. So here's another question, and we'll only do 2 because I know we're losing you guys. It's getting late. Without a university, how would you suggest Maricopa attract high-tech startups or an incubation center?
I think there are many communities doing it without a university, and I think it takes the will of this type of engagement. I mean, Mayor, congratulations that you've built an ecosystem and a team that values this, that is having this conversation, that is looking to elevate your own entrepreneurs to the next stage of growth. And I think it takes all of you to raise your hand to say, we want access to additional support services. And there are lots of incubators and accelerators across the country that are partnering with communities. SeedSpot is just one of those, that are in partnership with the community to bring about change, because the community invites us in, not because we have a top-down model of approaching it. So it starts here. You're doing the work. And I think the opportunity is to put Maricopa on the map as a leader in doing it right.
And I would just add that it's important to create a concentration of people together. whether it's networking events or a virtual incubator or co-working space, you need to bring these people together on a regular basis so that they can leverage off of each other the way they do.
And to echo off of SeedSpot, youth, build the pipeline, code school for kids, programming, the kinds of programs and opportunities where young people, especially in grade school, learn about risk-taking, they learn about opportunity analysis, about ethical leadership, those kinds of entrepreneurial traits and characteristics. If we start building that pipeline earlier, younger, STEM and STEAM initiatives are hugely important, and I think you're doing some of those. So those are the kinds of things I think that can help us over time build out a pipeline that will allow us to have a tech focus and a tech system, a tech-driven ecosystem.
For sure, for sure. Well, thank you so much for your participation and your thoughts. Before everyone goes, that's a wrap for the 2018 Economic Summit. After today, I believe there's two things that we can take away. The city of Maricopa has a very unique opportunity to do something incredibly innovative. And the second thing is that we cannot do it alone. So with that being said, I'd like to thank our keynote speaker and our panelists. And as a token of our sincere appreciation, we have a small gift. It's just a magnifying glass that says Think Big. And I think that you guys have each shared with us how you think big every single day. So please come down here so that we can take a big photo. And once again, thank you to everyone that attended today.